in 2005, I was broke, living paycheck to paycheck, 30 years old, having a roommate. I mean, it was just like I was not where I wanted to be. So I started to research businesses that I could start with very low investment, and because I had no money at all. And I came upon crime scene cleaning. I was very upfront with my attorneys. The end game is to get to a certain point and sell this out to venture capital.
Today's guest on the 5-year exit is Laura Spaulding, an operator who spent the last 2 decades building, fixing, and scaling businesses from the inside out. She's best known as the founder of Spaulding Decon, a crime scene cleanup company she started as a one-woman operation and grew into a multi-location national franchise. Her story doesn't start in a boardroom. It starts with real adversity, going from homelessness to building a business and real estate portfolio valued in the tens of millions. Along the way, she's led teams through chaos, built systems at scale, and lived the reality of what it takes to grow something that can actually run without you. Today, Laura works with founder-led and private equity-backed companies to bring structure, accountability, and leadership into businesses that are stuck or overwhelmed, helping them move from survival mode to something that can truly scale. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've been on quite a journey. You've actually scaled and sold 4 different businesses. Can you just walk us through your journey a little bit?
Yeah. So the first company I started was Spaulding Decon, a crime scene cleaning company back in 2005 when I was a police officer. I was, very disenchanted with the low pay, the glass ceiling. There's no future in that business industry job, whatever you want to call it. So I started my crime scene cleaning company in 2005. And then in 2012, I started a medical waste disposal company. And within 18 months, Stericycle was knocking on my door, offering me 2.5 times gross sales. So I immediately just sold that. I was like,
Right, when
God,
opportunity knocks, take it.
yes. I mean, I wasn't looking, but they came cold calling me, and I was like, yeah, no problem. So I sold that, made a good amount of money on that. I parlayed that money into franchising my company, and I started the process in 2014, but we didn't actually start franchising until 2016. And then during that time, I had a property management company, but I sold the franchise system, the corporate location, and the property management company in 2025. So just last year. Like I said,
person, or you sold them
no,
individually?
no. So the franchise system in the corporate location was sold to one person, and then the property management company was sold to another property management company.
Excellent. Okay. So you started this back. I love the transition from police officer to crime scene cleanup. You saw an opportunity there, right? Obviously, that you were uniquely suited to take advantage of. But do you remember what was going through your brain when you thought, oh, I could start this business? What made you take the leap?
I think it was desperation more than anything else. In 2005, I was broke, living paycheck to paycheck, 30 years old, having a roommate. I mean, it was just like I was not where I wanted to be. So I started to research businesses that I could start with very low investment, and because I had no money at all. And I came upon crime scene cleaning. And while it is not a cheap investment, it is less. You can do it, bootstrap it. But in order to scale quicker, I would have needed to have a lot more capital than what I had. So what took me 10 years could have taken me 4 or 5 if I had, a substantial amount of capital.
How did you scrape the money? Living paycheck to paycheck, how did you scrape the money together to get it started?
So what I did is I had met a guy who was starting the same type of business in Oklahoma. And he told me that he put a business plan together and went to his local banker and got an SBA loan for 150,000. So he gave me his business plan. I just changed the name on it to fit me and obviously my financials and stuff. I went to bank after bank and was denied.
Mm.
And I called him and I said, I don't understand. You went to one bank and got approved for 150. I just went to 4 banks and was denied by all of them. And then it was like one of those light bulb moments. I knew exactly then that I was denied because I was a woman.
Mm.
I had no doubt in my mind. So went home, pouted about it for a day or two, and then I had another light bulb moment. Wait a minute. I I live in my house that I purchased, the bank owns it, and I have a roommate, so I could try a HELOC. So I
Mhm.
went to a fifth bank, lied to them and said I needed new windows for my house, and they wrote me a check for 15 grand. So
That's
that
awesome.
was how I did it. So, I got 10% of what he got.
Mhm.
He lasted in business about 4 years. I made it 20.
Hmm. Did you keep up with him? Obviously, a little bit. So, what do you think did him in?
I think it was he was trying to keep his day job as a nurse and do this on the side. And when you don't have full focus on your business, the business is not going to perform for you. If you treat it like a hobby, it will give you hobby money.
Hmm, that is a great quote right there. Um, okay, so talking about building this business, you had $15,000. It's 2005, about to head into 2008 recession. Tell me about building this in a tough industry and then heading into a tough market. What were those first couple of years like?
The 2008 mortgage crisis was the best thing that ever happened to my business.
Hmm.
We tripled sales in 1 year because we started getting
Okay.
all of the foreclosure properties. And
Oh,
we were doing mold remediation, meth lab cleanup, crime scenes in them. Homeless people were breaking in. Like it was mass chaos back then. People couldn't afford their homes. They stopped paying for, trash removal and all this kind of stuff. So we got a ton of work and very big national accounts through that mortgage crisis in 2008 to 2012, right around there.
how much do you think? I've spent a lot of time interviewing startup companies, and it seems like around year 3, there's a turning point. Like if you can make it to year 3 or 4, you start getting credibility, you start getting your systems and processes dialed in, you've got some testimonials from clients. How much did that help you, or do you not think it was a factor in getting all those national accounts?
I think it was because I was willing to do the work anywhere. So we would travel to Jacksonville if we had to. We did meth labs in Tennessee if we had to. So I was very mobile. I was able to pivot with the demands of the client, and that was a game changer. But the issue is because I had such low startup money, I was still working in the business for the
Mhm.
first decade.
Mhm. When did you start becoming profitable to the point where you thought, okay, I can breathe a little? How many years did that take?
I think I quit my day job after 3 years.
Okay.
2 years, I'm sorry, 2 years. So it was 2000. Well, I started in November of 2005. So let's say 2006. And I quit in May of 2008. So 2 years, I was replaced my income completely, but I was still working in the business because I didn't have really good staff. I didn't trust the staff they needed management and oversight.
Yeah. Where did things break first as you started to grow?
Um, I think when I started to hire and delegate, that was a really pivotal point because, you don't hiring is a skill. And I still say this to this day. And it's one that I would say I'm not very good at. You go with your gut on people. I have found that a lot of applicants will exaggerate their experience, their skill set. And then once you hire them and get them in, you see their true colors, you see their lack of abilities in certain areas. So there's a lot of learning with hiring the right person. And I've made a ton of bad hires and very few good hires. So there was a lot of learning with that. And as I grew, I started to utilize more tools like personality tests, the PI, DISC test, background checks, calling references. I mean, you do as much as you can to try to know that person
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that that person is a good fit. But inevitably, you're not going to be correct every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I work in behavioral analytics with Culture Index, a tool
Uh,
similar to AI. And so I always say to people, like, it's not a silver bullet. It'll get you 70% of the way there. You still have to interview for culture, passion, moral compass, previous experience, right? Like, there's still
yep.
work to be done even with that. I'm curious because one of the things that I do often is working with leaders to help them understand how they might be shooting themselves in the foot. Did you, while going through with the behavioral assessments, did you learn anything about yourself that you maybe had an aha moment of how you could step up as a better leader?
I think early on, I was hiring out of necessity and I was hiring too late. So I
Mm,
was scrambling. I was making hires out of exhaustion. We
mhm,
need somebody like tomorrow, that type. So I was gathering, the 4 or 5 names and trying to pick the best of the worst. And that caused mistakes because I was filling an instant need, but then as time went on, it created more problems than I would have had if I would have taken my time and selected a good person for a future hire. So in
mhm.
other words, I was always behind the 8 ball is what I felt. I was always hiring for yesterday when I should have been looking forward.
Yes, exactly that. We talk often with our clients about have a process, have a system,
Hmm.
and be looking 2 to 3 years out of what the structure of the business needs to be, because then you can get systemized about it. You can start looking for talent when you don't need them. So uh, that you're not alone. Just to say you were not
No,
alone in
I'm
that
I'm
journey.
not. And as time went on, I lost confidence in myself in that area. It's not something that I enjoy doing. So I delegated that out to an HR person, a staffing company, and I noticed they were making the same mistakes, if not, this with the same people. So that's when I realized this is a human problem. This isn't a analytical problem. This isn't something that I can get off my PI test. This
Mhm.
is, they're making the same problems I am and they have more experience. So then I started to feel a little bit better about it. And I realized this is not an exact science.
Yeah.
There's no way to perfect this.
Right. And there's experience that's absolutely necessary,
Yep.
right? After you go down it. Okay, so you talk about people being the first thing to kind of break as you grew. When did that in the journey, from 2005 on, when did you really start feeling that stress of not putting the right people in the right seats or maybe not being the right leader that they needed? When in the growth journey did that really show up?
Um, I don't think it did ever on the corporate side because I was working, with them very closely. I was managing, kind of the estimates and the hiring, the firing, the training, and all that stuff. So I was very hands on. It's when I started to franchise and then I delegated that out to someone else is when I noticed the break.
Mm. Talk me through the franchising decision. How did that come about?
That was something that well, I told you that, we tripled business in 2008. So we were getting all these national accounts. And I was having lunch with my lawyer one day, and he said, you've got all these national accounts and you're subcontracting these to third party companies. Why don't you just franchise? And I didn't know anything about franchising at the time. So I was very naive. And I said, I don't know anything about that. I'm not really interested in it. He's like, well, you're technically already doing it, but you could be making more money if you would just keep it all under one umbrella. So I really kind of blew him off. So fast forward a couple more years, I think it was 2011 or 12, and he said it again. And I said, all right, let me look into this. And we were so busy back then. That was our biggest growth, between that 2008, 2012. And um, at that point, I was starting to feel the pain of using subcontractors. I had jobs in Hawaii, Alaska, Maine, California, and I was using subcontractors. Well, the subcontractors got fat on the hog in 2008, and their desires and their needs started to go down because they were just living it up at that point. So
Mhm.
I started to get less communication from them. They took longer to give me their photos and their proof of work and bids and all this kind of stuff. So I noticed like this is falling apart. So that's when I started, and admittedly, I did a really half-assed job of researching franchising and really understanding it. I didn't know anyone in franchising. I had not even a franchisee. So everything that I researched was just kind of, you know, I would say skewed from the blogs or whatever that I found online.
Mhm.
So I contacted a consulting company to kind of inquire from them, and that's where the disaster started. By hiring the consulting company, it just went downhill from there for another decade.
Let's say somebody listening to this is considering going down the franchising route of their business. Is there any resource you would recommend that they look into that would give them a good foundation?
Yeah, so it depends. So it's very different if you're considering franchising your company versus buying a franchise.
Let's say
So,
franchising your company.
okay, so if you're considering and franchising your company, I would not necessarily talk to anyone in the space because they're going to be biased. So if it's a service based, I would talk to another service based. So if I'm a plumber and I want to franchise my plumbing company, I would call an AC franchise and I would say, "Hey, I was wondering if I could pay you for your honest opinions on this." And that's what I should have done. And I didn't do that because I believed the consultant that I hired,
Mhm.
and it was all just bullshit. They were just, taking me for my money.
Tell me about a little bit more about that story. What happened there?
Well, when you hire a consultant, the point is that you want them to literally hold your hand and show you the ropes, tell you how to organize, tell you how to get your operating agreements up. How do you get your processes and systems all down in writing? And then you want them to tell you like, hey, what is the worst case scenario? What is the best case scenario? And I remember, after I hired him, the first time the consultant came and sat with me and we were trying to figure out our organization and where we wanted to franchise in which particular states, I said, hey, I just want to make sure before we start here that my type of business, because it's very unique, a crime scene cleaning business, it hadn't been done, is franchisable. And he literally turned to me and he goes, well, I can't tell you that. And I'm like, why the fuck did I hire you then? Like that's literally your sole job. So from that point on, that was the first day. It just went downhill from there. And then I knew that they were just basically checking boxes. And when they delivered my operations manual, that was part of the deal. They were creating my operations manual. It was a copy and paste from another company
Oh no.
that had nothing to do with my stuff. So I fired them. They were horrible. Um, and then I just hired individual consultants moving forward for specific things that I needed. Like when I was ready to hire a COO or I was ready to hire a CFO, and just things like that to kind of guide me on that process.
Looking back at those early years, that first kind of decade, right? Do you remember how like your revenue and profits, what that trajectory looked like to get from year
Yeah,
1 to year 10?
and that's another thing. That's a really good question because most people think, oh, I'm going to sell a franchise and I'm going to be profitable. And that's not the case at all. So, depending on your franchise model, it could take you 50 locations before you're even profitable.
Mm.
That's how expensive the venture is. And that's something a consultant should tell you. And they didn't tell me that. So
Mhm.
this whole time I bootstrapped it. I have never had a business loan. So I bootstrapped from the profits of my corporate location to use the money to finance selling franchises, paying the legal fees, and you have to have a lawyer on retainer. You have to do a financial audit annually at the tune of $15,000 per year that is independent of any tax returns or anything like that. So it's a very expensive venture, and in hindsight, I would not have done it. I would have started corporate stores, which have been far cheaper and more profitable.
Very interesting. And so, do you feel like you kind of ramped up profitability, right? 2008, things took off, you 3x your revenue, profits, I'm assuming, went up. Um, do you have a typical profit margin?
Yes, it's for franchisees, it's 37%.
Hmm.
For my corporate location, it was about 42 to 43%.
Okay. And so you're then basically you started taking that 42% and putting it back
Yep.
into the franchise model. When did the franchises, when did you reach that threshold of
30
now
locations.
30 locations? And how far into the journey was that? You said 2016 you launched your first franchise.
Yeah, 2016, I had my first two. And then I steadily got, 5 to 10 per year. But as I was signing more franchisees, I was terminating too because they were stealing, they were not reporting revenue, they were evading royalties, you name it. Franchisees will do it. Whether it comes to, oh, I need to save $10 per uniform shirt, so I'm going to go have my friend Sally Joe make it in her garage. And the logo's all effed up. It doesn't look anything like the brand. So what I found is instead of training and supporting these franchisees, my job was mostly I have to protect the brand
You
because
became a
these
police
guys,
officer again
yes, I
in a
came
different
became and
way.
that's not what I wanted to do. And then it creates an adversarial relationship because you're policing because it's your brand. So if the
Mhm.
guy in Texas steals you know $20 off of somebody's dresser, that affects the rest of the system, not just the guy in Texas. So it has a domino effect, and it's imperative that you protect your brand if you're going to do it.
Mm. And so what about what point was the 30 franchises? 2020?
I think it was, well, I had 75 total,
Okay.
but again, I was adding and subtracting almost annually. So at some point it became a net neutral. So I don't remember the years, but I
Mhm.
franchised between 2016 and until 2023 I stopped franchising because I just could not take the
You're like, this is
policing.
just going to keep
This,
it.
yeah,
That
yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. That's almost a decade of investment there. So I feel like you know whether it was for you or not. Um,
Yep.
what was the hardest shift? And probably what made you realize in 2023 you didn't want to do it anymore. But what was the hardest shift you had to make personally to stop being the operator and start being the builder and the franchise owner?
The hardest shift was trusting who I delegated to. So as we grew, I had learned from my lessons of my corporates, my one location, and I didn't make those mistakes in the franchise. So 2020 COVID hit, and a bunch of the franchise systems were laying off really good qualified employees. So I snagged them. And
Mm.
I hired more than I needed at the time because I knew where we were going. So I hired my franchise development person, director of franchise coaching, franchise coaches. I had a CFO, a COO. I mean, we really ramped up. I had a marketing and media department separately because we had a really big media arm to it. We were doing everything from podcasts to a very heavy channel on YouTube and TikTok and all this kind of stuff. So I had a separate arm working for each of those, and I just oversaw it all. We used the EOS system, so it made it really easy for me to have my weekly, quarterly, weekly meetings, the 90-minute meetings, L10s. And I knew where every department was, what the struggles were, what the numbers were. There was certain metrics that I would make sure that they filled out in advance that were important for me, so I could see the trend going up or down, and I could jump in and hopefully fix it at that point.
Mhm. As you've been on this journey, I'm sure you've seen other founders go through similar. Where do you see other people get stuck as they're in this rapid scale and growth?
The biggest one, I think, is, well, there's two. One of them is that they are working in the business instead of on it. And that's a double edged sword because I literally would have franchisees literally start on their day one. They're supposed to be working in their business to learn it, and they're trying to delegate everything out. I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not the way it works. You don't even know what you're doing. How the hell are you going to hire other people to do that? So there is a balance there that you have to measure. And I recommend, like, new people, new franchisees, work in your business for the first 2 years. You need to know absolutely everything about it. Then start firing yourself by hiring your replacement.
Mhm. Talk me
So
through
that's
that
what I
because
did.
so what I've seen with especially founder CEOs who have started like you started from the ground floor and come up is that they really struggle to hire that next level of leadership because they're always trying to find one person who can take over everything that they do, not knowing that it's unlikely you're going to hire someone who has a
Hmm.
founder mentality.
Right.
So when I've seen it go wrong, that's what happens. Is like they hire one person, they're like, "This is my COO," and now they're gonna do everything. It's like, well, that's probably doomed to fail. Like, pick one
Yep.
area. So tell me about your journey with that.
I did not fall into that, thank God. So I've seen people do that. They hired the COO and they're like, take care of everything. And that's great in theory, but that's not what I did. So what I did is I hired an integrator in each department. So
Mhm.
I had that segregated out so that they were specialized and they just weren't, broad like a COO would be. So I had a marketing integrator, a media director that was my integrator, and I just kept hiring those. And that is honestly what worked best for me rather than hiring one person underneath me to do it all.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me about, you talked about working on the business versus working in the business. When you do it right, what does that look like on a typical week or a quarter or year? Like what percent are you spending where and how are you breaking up that time?
Back then.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was running the franchise system, I had a L10 meeting with each of my department heads for the franchise system. So we discussed everything from the marketing, the media, franchise sales to the coaching. And the coaching was always the heaviest because you've got franchisees not performing, you've got them bastardizing the brand, you name it. That was always the one that we spent the most time on in our L10 meetings. Because if you're familiar with EOS, you go to your IDS, which is identify and solve, these problems. And 95% of the problems were all franchisee created problems.
Mm-hmm.
So we would all kind of focus on that and attack it. Then I would have another L10 meeting with my general manager of my Tampa corporate location on, staffing, jobs, estimate. I liked to see his ratio. Those were some of the KPIs that I was at. How many estimates are you going to and how many are you converting? So that's a big deal for me. I would look at that. And I would also look at that on the franchise side because it's amazing to me that you'll have a franchisee with a 75% closing rate, and then you'll have another one with a 23% closing rate. What's the problem? You have the same service, you're doing the same thing for the same brand. It's the operator. That's the problem. So then we were able to identify issues right away. I would send a franchise coach over there and say, this guy clearly cannot sell, so help him sell.
I have to ask the behavioral analytics question because you said you were leveraging some tools. Did you find that there was a certain set of traits that worked well for franchisees? Did you ever run
That's a
into
really good question. So one thing I learned is stay away from any individual that's too entrepreneurial, because what they do is they get into your system, they take all of your IP, and they walk away from the system and start competing against you.
I think they can do it
So,
better. Yep.
yep, they think they can do it better. And of course, is that legal? No, it's not, but they do it every single day. So, and again, that comes back to where we have to defend the brand. So it's very, very expensive to litigate all this stuff that we had to do. But if we didn't do it, we would lose every franchisee. So it's really a catch 22 when it comes to franchising, protecting your brand versus supporting who is doing well in the brand.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost becomes just a cost of doing business, right? Is
It
knowing that that's
is.
going to happen occasionally, budget for it. Any other things that you found that make for a good franchisee?
I had very few good ones. I would say less than 5 out of 75 that were
Mm.
actually good. So what I like is military people, former
Hmm.
military, because they know how to follow a system.
Ooh, okay.
They've been following a system the entire time. We would do PI and I would do disc. So I would stay
Mhm.
away from high Ds on the disc stuff because I'm a high D and I knew I could never be a franchisee.
Right.
Not in a
That's
million
the
years.
entrepreneurial trait, right? Like
Way too
live
entrepreneurial.
in a future, I can figure everything out myself.
Yep. And I know that bad franchisees are people that worked in the corporate world and just sit in a cubicle all day. Believe me, they
Mm.
want to go out. They're used to collecting a paycheck. They don't want to go out and work. What they'll do is they'll just throw 5 grand at Google AdWords and sit by the phone and wait for it to ring. So they just don't have that ambition to make
Yeah.
a business work because they're so used to just sitting in a cubicle making 150 grand a year.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that too, because it's like that roll up your sleeves tenacity.
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess I'd be curious. I always love going into organizations and I'm like, if they have more than like, say, 10 of the same person doing the same role, I'm like, let's give them all the behavioral analytics and see what
Yeah.
patterns we can find in the data. That's always my
Yeah.
joy. So,
So the
okay.
staff
So,
was great in terms of the PI. We were able to put the correct staff in the right seats. So that worked great. I think we by the time we got that large, we only made very few mistakes on that. It was more on the franchise side that it's almost like a job interview. They're telling you what you want to hear, but then once they sign on the dotted line, that's not what you got.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that is tough. What would you recommend for somebody else who's going through kind of chaotic, extreme growth? What are the first systems that you would recommend they put in place? I mean, you mentioned
So I
EOS.
would,
So,
yeah, I like EOS a lot. I've been using it for many years, so I'm really, and I think it's really good to have a if you've already grown that much and everything is chaos. I think hiring an integrator, which is what we did many years ago, and to come into your facility and really teach you how to identify if you have the right person in the right seat, and what are your core values. And everybody needs to go by your core values. So we would, the example that they use is you could have the best sales rep in the world that is making you the most money, but he's a complete prick to everyone in the office. You got to fire the guy. You just have to do it. And it sounds counterintuitive. You're like, whoa, he's making me millions of dollars, but he's not. He's killing the rest of the team by being such an asshole. So, I thought that that was a great exercise in setting up the system. The next thing, to avoid all this chaos, you
wait,
need to
wait.
have the,
You said hire an integrator. Did you mean like an EOS implementer? Like
yes,
you come
EOS
in and runs
implementer.
it
I'm
for 5
sorry,
days?
implementer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what
Sorry.
we
All
did
right.
and I
Next
thought it
thing.
was fantastic. The next thing is I would have your current people in the seats start to document every single thing that they do every single day, whether it's by a Loom video, whether it's in a Word document, it doesn't matter, but everything needs to be documented. You should never let your business rely on one or two people ever. So if
What did you
your
do with those
admin,
documents?
so I made videos for literally everything, and I have a handwritten operations manual. So I did a combination of both because people learn differently. One thing they can have reading, they can hit Control F and find exactly what they're looking for. And then I have literally hundreds of videos that how to take out a seat in a car, like just so anything that seems even stupid to you is not stupid to a brand new person because they're
Hmm.
walking in with fresh eyes. And if my bookkeeper God forbid, had a terrible accident and had to be out of work for 4 months. I want to be able to put another person in that role and not skip a beat. And by having those videos and those manuals, it's key.
Yeah. I think a lot of times people see these things as costs or like lost productivity. In EOS implementer, which can cost, a great one can cost you 50 grand a year, but I have seen it return 10 times that in the 2 years
Absolutely.
you typically walk with them. And then even documenting things and making sure it's in a searchable format, right? That takes away from
Yep.
somebody's time to do that. So it feels like, oh, that's a productivity loss. But like, let's say you hired a $50,000 person whose
Uh-huh.
job was to build that out, make sure everybody documented it. Like that $50,000 and that person to lead the initiative would yield tenfold results. So I think sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people need to shift their brain around that.
Yes.
Um, you've seen a lot of teams up close. Where do you think leadership teams usually break as companies scale?
When everybody is not on the same page to what the goal is. So, and that helps with, again, bringing up EOS. It brings up what your core values are. I had a document created. Oh my God, the name of it is going to escape me right now. But if you're familiar with Cameron Harold,
Mm-hmm. Vivid.
um, Vivid Vision. Thank you. That's what I had created, was a vivid vision, and I had it printed out. Everyone could see exactly where I was going, and each department had um, a track to get there
Mm,
for each point that I had. So that was crucial for me. I think I created that back in 2020 when we were really scaling the franchise system, and um, it it helped people know the big vision and know what their part of it is.
I love that. That's awesome.
Hmm.
I want to be cognizant of time here. So I want to move into kind of the exit story.
Hmm.
When did you start thinking about exiting your company?
So I always had an exit in mind when I started my company in 2005. That was the end play the entire time. But again, because I had to bootstrap the company, I was taking longer than I wanted to, right? Nothing works at my speed. So
Right.
once from the very beginning of the franchise idea process, the legal entity, all the formation stuff, my whole thing, I was very upfront with my attorneys and everybody. The end game is to get to a certain point and sell this out to venture capital.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much not a secret. I mean, I think of just about every single franchise system, the end game is to sell out to venture capital.
And so when did you start putting the official things in place? Were you always just every year like, here's one more initiative I have to work on in order to make this more sellable? Or was there kind of an end sprint?
No, so I think when I started in 2016, the first two franchisees were total disasters. This is definitely like the learning curve. Just complete idiots, and got rid of them immediately. And at that point I was like, okay, how many do I need at this point? At this point it was a pain point. How many do I need to get the hell out of this? So it was right away when I knew that. And so, like I said, throughout the years, I was told 50 units is what you need to, I guess, entertain interest from venture capital. So
Okay.
my goal was constantly, let's get to 50, let's get to 50. But again, I was on that teeter totter where I would get 30, lose 10, get 40, lose 15. You know what I'm saying? So it went on way longer than I ever thought it would. I thought I could probably do it in 5 years, and it took me 9 or 10.
And so when you got to that point where you felt like you had that 30 or the 50, right? And you're like, okay, now it's sellable. What did that look
Hmm.
like for you? What did you
So
start
that's when
doing with that?
I contacted, I had been, when you're a franchise system, you literally get, I would say, 2 to 3 emails a day from venture capital, family offices.
Mm.
Hey, we're interested in buying your company. But see, they don't know how big you are at that point. So that's when I contacted a brokerage that's very great reputation, very popular in the franchise space. Contacted them. I think at that point I had 50 units or 52, somewhere around there. And that was in 2022. And right around there, first quarter of 2022, contacted them. They flew out to meet me. This is perfect for venture capital. The whole thing, I was like ready to go. Right. And not 4 or 5 months later, I caught 19 franchisees not paying royalties, stealing essentially from the company. So I had to fire 19 franchisees, terminate them. So take 52 and subtract 19, and
Was
we
it
lost
part
80% of
of
our
the
revenue.
diligence process that made you realize this?
No, it was the Hurricane Ian that hit. Typically, franchisees, at least in the service blue collar type space, they're not used to making an exorbitant amount of money. So when you give franchisees a hurricane and they can make $500,000 in 1 month, the greed sets in.
Hmm.
Oh, well, we don't need her. We know how to do this and now. So we don't need to keep paying our royalties. So then they start to defraud and deflect and hide revenue and all this other stuff. So literally overnight, we lost 80% of our revenue.
That's crazy. There's no way to get them back on track.
No, not when you're stealing. They've already cut off paying royalties. They're hiding revenue. They stayed down in Florida. Most of them weren't even from Florida,
Hmm.
just to capitalize on that hurricane.
So interesting, right? As you make more money, you become more greedy with it. Isn't that
Oh,
silly? When you
absolutely.
have less, you're
Uh-huh.
more free, more grateful. That's crazy. And
Yeah.
then, okay, so that fell apart. That I'm sorry, what year was that?
That was 2022 or 21,
All
21 or
right, so that
22,
fell
right around
apart.
there.
So then what happened? You
So
get through the
then
chaos of all these 19.
we had to terminate all of them. Now the brokerage said, hey, you can't, venture capital's not interested now because you're too small, because you
Mhm.
lost 80% of your revenue. So what I did is we sold, I would say 5 or 6 more in 2022, first quarter of 2023. And then I said, you know what? This is miserable. I hate every part of it. I don't want to continue to do this, because literally what I'm doing is taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, 2 steps forward. And it was just, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
The staff, who was absolutely fantastic, was defeated.
Yeah.
They said, why are we trying to help people that are going to steal from us? Several of them lost their jobs, because when we lost 80% of that revenue, I had to
Yeah.
lay them all off. They
Oh,
were furious. We had, people that were getting stomach ulcers, uh, employees that, just suffered because of the greed of these franchisees. And, the litigation was expensive, the whole thing. So I basically went to a different brokerage and said, okay, I know this is not venture capital anymore, but let's sell it as is, that type of thing. And so, um, we were able to sell it to just two people that had no business experience whatsoever.
Um, so just to go back for a minute, because actually what I found through this podcast is it is very common for the first sale attempt to fail. For whatever reason,
Hmm.
something gets uncovered in due diligence, or a lot of times the sophisticated buyer waits until the last minute and then renegotiates the terms of the deal. Um, and I've heard this emotional toll before, right? Where it's like, first off, selling your business requires a lot more energy than just running your business, right?
Hmm.
Now you're running your business and selling your business. So you're already running at an energy deficit. Then you get to, you start getting into it and you've put all this effort in, and emotionally just wrecks you when it doesn't happen. What advice would you have for somebody going into their first sale, knowing that, I don't know what the percentage is, right? But there's a 50-50 chance this isn't going to pan out.
Well, I think you still need to go through the same efforts, and those efforts you only have to do one time. For example, systematizing and documenting your policies and procedures, your systems, all that stuff. You only have to do that once. So I would say do that before you ever engage a broker to help you sell it. I'm sorry. Know what your in your industry, like if you have a plumbing company and you want to sell the plumbing company, it's not a franchise system. There is a different multiple of EBITDA for just one location versus an entire franchise system. So you need to really know that. So if you have a franchise system, I highly recommend that you use a franchise broker type M&A person, because it's a whole different ballgame. Whereas if you're just selling, one plumbing location, you can use really any business broker to sell your business that you like and that you're comfortable with. So what I would say is set up your systems and processes before you ever sell that. Then with your broker, you need to get your financials together. Like, a lot of people are putting personal expenses in their business books. So you need to be able to back all that out, because those are not going to be passed on to the new owner. So just little things like that. And any good business broker or M&A advisor will help you get that together to find out what your true EBITDA is.
Who else did you have on your team going through this? You had
The
your
sale process?
yeah. Hmm.
No one.
No, I mean
Because what
of like tax attorney or uh,
oh, I'm sorry.
advisor.
So yeah, I had my business broker, and then I had my CPA, who's also, his company does our books. And then I had an M&A lawyer
Mhm.
look at everything, handle everything.
If you were going to give advice to people who are thinking of selling in the next 5 to 10 years, if you're going to give them three tactical pieces of advice, right? Do this, do this, do this. Make sure you don't forget that. What would they be? What would that be?
The first one would be, make sure that your business can run without you. So I knew for a decade, because I was running the franchise system, that my business could run without me. I just need to put the right person in that right seat. So it makes the business more valuable when you have good people. Now, I had 6 businesses that I was running at the same time that I had, my franchise system and all that. So I was really going through people. I thought I was doing a great job hiring, general managers, operations managers on my corporate location, but they all sucked. They spent a lot of time doing as little as possible. So there was, turnover there. Hired a sales rep, he never made a sale. That type of thing. So that would be my first one. Make sure that the business runs without you. You can go to Europe for 3 months and come back and nothing has changed in your business. So that would be the first one. The second one is document all your systems and processes. I like Loom Video. I keep, a bunch of things on there. I still do it for my VAs, my EAs, anything that I need them to do. Once you do that one time, you don't have to do it again. So unlike the old days when we would hire a bookkeeper, somebody else would have to spend, 40, 80 hours training them. You don't have to do that anymore. The third thing is, I would say, think of your business in a way that if a stranger walked in, could they immediately start running it from day one with what you've set up? So you need to look at it from a lens of the outside and say, okay, I'm here. What software do we use? All the logins and passwords. Everything needs to be really centralized and focused on running that business.
Now you're a couple months post sale, right? You sold it
Hmm.
to two private people last fall. Is that correct?
December 30th of 2025.
Okay. And so now it's a couple months past that we're recording this. What did you think you had prepared for, but you really hadn't?
I don't think that there's anything. They've needed me very little, which tells me that I did a good job in setting them up. I rarely hear from them. So I had all my trainings videoed and sent out. So there's been no surprises from me or for me. But I think the most frustrating thing is I had in my head the entire time I was going to sell to PE, which would have been so smooth, so easy. just really not a lot of heavy lifting because they have tons of people that do it. Whereas I sold to individuals who had no business experience. So I'm having to do a little more education than I would have if it would have been like a PE firm.
Right, right. And how did you find them just and structure the deal? Is it seller finance, right? Because if you'd sold to PE, you would have gotten a big chunk of money and then a couple years later probably gotten another buyout, earnout. How
Yeah,
did you end up
that was
finding
another
that?
downside of not selling to PE. I could have just gotten my cash out, walked away, and had a great life. But this I offered to seller finance, because we had taken such a big hit with losing 80% of our revenue. Um, I was willing to seller finance. I love being the bank. I do private money lending as well. So that's not a problem for me. It's just the terms I had to be very generous with,
Mhm.
because they just don't have the assets to be able to get funding for something this size.
What are your, I've got two final questions. What are your backup plans if it doesn't work out? If something happens and they can't run the business effectively, what does that look like for you?
I'll take it back and resell it.
Okay. And what has changed in your life since you've sold the business?
Not much, really. I still have three companies that I'm running. I have a mortuary transport company that I purchased back in May of 2025. And I'm running that, and I'm actually getting that ready with, I put a bunch of system software in it. We're getting ready to add AI to that, and then I'll position that to sell it at the end of this year. And then I have a more brokerage, a real estate brokerage, and then I have my real estate investment company. So I spend most of my time now making offers on houses, fix and flips, doing some wholesales and things like that. That's really where my passion is in the real estate.
Mhm.
So I don't see that going any different in the future.
Got it. Okay. Last question to all the listeners out there who are founder CEOs running the company thinking about selling. What's your one last piece of advice for them?
Do a bunch of research on your own, and then start talking to a bunch of different people. Don't just rely on one or two, like a consulting firm or something, because they're going to tell you what you want to hear so that you hire them. So make sure that you do a bunch of research, because like I said, every type of business has a different multiple that it sells for. So you need to know what that is so that you don't get screwed when you go to sell it. You need to maximize it. This will probably be the largest um, windfall of money that you get in your life. So you need to do it right the first time.
Mhm. That's great. Great advice. All right, Laura. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Becca.
Have a great day. This is the 5 Year Exit with Becca Shea. Thanks for listening. And if you're interested in learning more about how we help CEOs and founders build great leadership teams that can work without them, go ahead and book a call with us. We'd love to talk more.